Yeah. And so let's go. Well, there's a couple different things I want to talk about in terms of the subconscious, but first we could say that think of the subconscious as where our pain resides, or our wounds, or our inner child, our emotions. And so it's usually things that you can't quite just like think of on the spot. If you try hard enough, or you're in a subconscious state, or if you're in hypnosis, you can get deeper. But if you think about it, so think, every time that there's some sort of a pressure or a stressor in your life that you can't deal with. And I think we've all done this. Oh, I can't handle it right now. I gotta go to work. I gotta do this. I'm gonna deal with it later. Well, as a child, we do that, but we don't even realize like we're doing it, right? Like, because as a child, you generally can't fight or flight or flee in the same way. So we take those stressors that happen as a child and we internalize them.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people around the world that are saying, okay, we know where Canada is, and British Columbia on the West Coast, right? Right. And you have this big city, Vancouver. Well, we are 500 miles north, or 800 kilometers north of Vancouver, and beautiful, lots of nature here, trees, animals, you name it. We have black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, moose, foxes, wolves, you name it. We have them all living in harmony in paradise. Today, a very, very inspiring guest, actually, Tera Oneil. Tara is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, yoga instructor, a holistic coach. She helps others access their subconscious mind, and a very, very important topic she will be talking about a lot, and transforms their lives, improving their health and wealth. Tara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much. It's so wonderful to be here. It's such an honor.
Thanks to have you. Tara, tell us about your background, where you are. How did you have had quite an experience yourself,
Yeah,
and take us all the way back to where you're from.
sure. So I was born and raised in New Jersey, the beautiful state of New Jersey, about an hour outside of Manhattan. And I had a pretty typical life. The white picket fence, and a good education, and I had a lot of I was very blessed, and I had a lot of wonderful things in my life. And so kind of fast forward, I was a school teacher, and things were really good, but there was something that was not right, that didn't feel right within me. And I woke up one day and I wanted to go on a journey of self exploration, and I had already started doing yoga and didn't really understand spirituality, having been raised in a Christian um, household. Had a little bit of a connection to spirit or God in that sense, but never really dove into it until I found yoga. And when I went on this journey of self discovery, I had what you might call an awakening. And I realized that there was more to life than just the go 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 of our Western culture. And
Yes.
so I wanted to dive even deeper in. And so I did a career switch. While I loved teaching, it was a passion of mine. I can now see that it was perfect for me at that time. But I ended up going and I became a yoga instructor. I went and I did my own deep healing work that almost all of us have some sort of, if you were born in a conditioned society where there's programming, and you go to a school and there's a government, you probably have some sort of trauma, and I use that very lightly. Yes, so I moved to the other side of the country, to California. I traveled the world for about 6 months, going to Asia, learning about other cultures, did a lot of really cool things. And we could go back to that in the story. But ultimately, what I found out is that of our minds, we are really only using 5 to 10%, and that there is a 90, 95% of other things that are going on in the subconscious or in the unconscious. And so I got really curious. I was like, well, I want to know what's going on there. And so once you realize that we're not even tapping into nearly half of our potential in our subconscious, and also like some of the gunk that lives there, just like, again, just from being human in the modern world, there's a lot of stuff there that we don't need. That's where our beliefs are, our unprocessed stressors, our emotions, our childhood, you know, issues, or whatever we ran into in that sense. So while I have, I've been really fortunate to have a wonderful life, and even as privileged as I was, I had stuff and that I had accumulated that maybe was handed down ancestrally. There's ancestral trauma. We could talk about that as well. So ultimately, it brought me to Southern California, where I opened a practice of hypnotherapy. So I help people get into that part of their subconscious mind so they could start releasing some of the things that they didn't need, right? So, I realized that any stressor that we have in our life that doesn't go processed, we hold on to it, be it in our body or our brain. And so people are carrying around all of this. And I wanted to share the secret. Like, you don't have to. You don't have to carry around this garbage or this stuff you don't need. So I opened the practice in Southern California, in San Diego, and it was just beyond my wildest dreams. I fell in love with the area, the practice, alternative healing. I found energy work. I met some amazing people, and I took some of the knowledge I had from meeting the yogis and the sages and the mystics on my travels. And so now I'm here and I'm with you, and I get to talk with these amazing people like yourself that have also had these awakenings and these amazing journeys that are helping, raise the collective consciousness.
So you found a very, very good place, San Diego. It's just about I believe it's one of the most beautiful places in all of the United States because doesn't get too hot, but still it has that year-round climate that makes it very accommodating, and it's a beautiful, beautiful area. So
Yeah.
if you talk about trauma and other things, were there any things in particular that affected you when you grew up, or was it a variety of issues that became part of your subconscious mind that you carried with you?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing was I was uh, a suppressor and a maybe a people pleaser and a perfectionist. And so I would always be like, I'm fine, and I would just push it down. And so I do think, women, are often, which I didn't even realize I had like anger and frustration as an adult. And little girls are not really told to, like, go box it out or go fight it out, right? It's just like, oh, I'm fine. And you put a smile on your face and nothing's going to bother me. And so I realized that over after so many years of pushing it down, and I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, and just being the archetype of maybe being the people pleaser, and keeping everybody together, making sure everything is copacetic, which I enjoyed doing at the time. I didn't realize I was accumulating a certain amount of stress on my nervous system. And then also the demands of being, you got to go to school, you got to get this, you got to get the spouse, you got to get the kids, you got to get this. And I think that takes a toll on most people. And then, just having, ancestors that, that had come over, and a lot, like, there was some poverty in there, and stressors that I never would have thought to look at. And when you list all of these stressors, it's like, wow, course, of course we're burning out. Of course we're overwhelmed, right? And so I think it was there. Like, I'm fortunate that I had a safe place to grow up in a loving environment. My parents did the best that they could. And there wasn't the time where it was, oh, everybody goes to therapy, or we weren't learning about emotional intelligence and all, like, raising conscious children. So it was just a different time. right? And so, we grew up, and then we get an opportunity to heal that version. And I looked at it as an opportunity. Oh, like, great. I don't have to hold on to this anymore. And I wanted to help other people realize that they can let go of it too.
So the critical point is, at what point do you realize it? And at what point then you take a big step out of what is familiar to you and what you have accepted as that is who you are and what your destiny is, and saying, no, I'm going to do something different. But there is usually something that happens that pushes you over that threshold.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it was a divorce of uh, a partnership that was nearly a decade, a wonderful partner. Though I had that awakening that was like, oh my gosh, did I do anything that I wanted to, or was it more society? Was it more pressure from the outside world and going with the flow and putting that smile on my face? And so, nothing against him, but I wanted to go on this journey of exploration, and I had to make that choice. And it was not an easy choice, of course, because I cared very much about him, but I chose that, and it was tough because I was at an age where it was like, do I choose the family and children route that all of my friends are choosing, and that's more socially acceptable, or do I quit my job and go to Asia for 6 months and travel around? And let me
So,
tell you, that second option was not completely embraced and encouraged by others.
so up to that point, you were doing what was expected,
Sure.
not
Hmm.
what your dreams were, or saying, well, I'm not happy, I want to do something else. But that's a big step, to be in a reasonably good relationship and having all these other things around you that develop, and all of a sudden you had to step out of that and then start traveling around the world. That's a big step.
And there was a lot of guilt, and I had to look at that. I'm a very privileged woman, and I should be grateful for what I have. I should be thankful that I have a job and people that love me, but I was really hurting. There was something that I didn't know, and like now I can look back, but my soul wanted more. It was like, no, this is part of your journey. This is what you signed up for, in a more esoteric way. Maybe my soul signed up for a little bit more of an adventure. So I had to work through that because I did. There were definitely some comments and some looks of like, oh, what is she doing and why? Like, and there is that when I had gone to like Bali, for example, or Thailand, or some of these places that Westerners are looked at like, oh, we're consuming, and we're just consuming off of them. And so I had to also look at that, like, how can I be a conscious traveler? How can I give back to the communities there and help them and support them? So to make it a little bit more of an equal exchange of energy. But yes, I mean, that's such a great point. And I had to deal with the potential shame of like, what's wrong with me that I'm not happy in this life that I supposedly chose.
Now, most people do not, or are not aware of the subconscious mind. What is it? Is that
Yeah.
the other you that is there somewhere in you, and every so often comes to the surface and say, why am I doing what I'm doing? I want to do something else. And then suppresses again. It argues inside of you about saying, no, it's all good. And but to then make ultimately the big step is a big one, because most people don't understand it or don't accept it, and saying, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. And so let's go. Well, there's a couple different things I want to talk about in terms of the subconscious, but first we could say that think of the subconscious as where our pain resides, or our wounds, or our inner child, our emotions. And so it's usually things that you can't quite just like think of on the spot. If you try hard enough, or you're in a subconscious state, or if you're in hypnosis, you can get deeper. But if you think about it, so think, every time that there's a some sort of a pressure or a stressor in your life that you can't deal with. And I think we've all done this. Oh, I can't handle it right now. I gotta go to work. I gotta do this. I'm gonna deal with it later. Well, as a child, we do that, but we don't even realize like we're doing it, right? Like, because as a child, you generally can't fight or flight or flee in the same way. So we take those stressors that happen as a child and we internalize them, and they go into our subconscious mind or into our body somewhere, and they usually shape the rest of our lives. So that time we were bullied as a child, well, now we're going to avoid people that look like that bully. Or we were, it doesn't always have to be emotional. It could be a car accident. You're in a car accident, you're going to avoid that color car. Driving, you don't like driving. So all these little mini micro traumas are going to stick with you until you actually process them. So those are stored, we could say those are stored in the subconscious mind. And so, Carl Jung talks about it as the shadow. And there's usually the shadow when we talk about that's repressed parts or unprocessed parts from our past. There is such thing as a golden shadow, which are good parts. But for the most part, we're talking about the ones that are a little bit tougher. And in order to make a change, usually you have to look at those parts, and they don't usually feel great, right? Because it's usually pain. There's a reason that we suppressed it. And so that comes up when you want to make a change or you really want to do a life review or see like what's inside.
And usually there are numerous ones that you may realize or may you not that you may not realize. And the
Yes.
cumulative amount is usually what then triggers the change. But I can see with a lot of people to make that change is very, very difficult, especially when it is expected that you are happy. You should be happy because you got everything that you can possibly need that
Right.
people see.
Yeah.
What they can't see is what is inside of you.
What's exactly. And they use the onion layer, peeling back the onion layers. Well, sometimes the universe will poke you and nudge you, like, we want you to make a change. We want you to do this. We want you to do that. And then you could start peeling the layers back gently. And well, what happens with me and with a lot of people, or what happened in the past, is I was getting those nudges, but I wasn't listening. And then eventually the universe just takes the rug and just goes, well, we're going to just rip all the onion layers back at once. So you have to deal with it or else. So that's the other thing where, I want to tell people they don't have to wait until that hits, that all the emotions come up, right? Because there's only so much that people can, like, before they start, you know, flooding out or bleeding over. So we want to not get to filling the cup that high where then you have to, luckily I made a choice that ended up being really good for me and I had those options. But that's also when people get triggered into bad habits, bad situations. And so we want to make sure that we're knowledgeable, that we're telling people about the inner self, the emotions that lie within, and more than just talk therapy, more than just speaking. Like, this is the subconscious is usually deeper than what we're just actually talking about. And so I speak a lot about how it's stored in the body. Yoga was what actually got me into understanding more about the subconscious, because I remember going to my first yoga class and I cried the whole class. And I'm like, this is bizarre. I've worked out a lot before, but I never. And so with yoga, it is tapping into your energy centers. And so in the yogic tradition, we have chakras, energy centers that are actually the root for holding our karma, our energy, how we process things from the past, things from the present, and potentially things from the future. So I know that's a lot, but yeah, there's just so much good stuff. So to answer your question, yes, on the surface, people will often say, "Well, you seemed fine. Well, you looked good. Well, you seemed happy," and so people can override that pain. It doesn't mean it's the right thing to do or it shouldn't be addressed, but just like an addiction, and us encouraging people to come forth and speak about their suffering of an addiction or a habit, also of emotional suffering, of depression, of anxiety, of overwhelm, of dissatisfaction. There shouldn't be shame around that.
What I find interesting is that, and be honest with you, I I always looked at yoga as being a form of exercise, and that's what it is. I did not realize that it meant more to others than just that part, and so I find that very very interesting. But and I know some people that are going to yoga and really working hard and really enjoying it, already committed to it. But I never, personally, never quite of realized that it can be much more than that. On the other hand, I'm into the gym quite a bit and competing and doing all those kinds of those are simple in the sense that I enjoy it. It's good for me physically, but also mentally. I never kind of looked at it as that it is more from a subconscious perspective than that, but it likely is.
Yeah, there are some yoga traditions, there's 8 limbs of it, and it's a way of life, and the physical part, the asana, is one of those 8 limbs. And then there's also meditation, there's breath work, there's service to others, do no harm, chanting, devotion. So there are a lot of layers to yoga, but yeah, I think any sort of movement is really important, to get the flow. So what we want is to get the mind body connection. I want people to associate what's happening in their body with their thoughts as well. So a lot of times in the West, we're very left brain, we're very analytical, and that often is at the cost of us being embodied and living a heart centered life. And so, you as an athlete, you know what it's like to be in your body as opposed to be in your head, right? I'm sure that after, during a workout, after a workout, like it's different than if you're sitting down to work, right? It's a different energetic of it. But we want to move the prana, the chi, because again, the mind and the body are not separated. But in our society, we do treat it like that, right? If there's something wrong with your body, it's pathological, or your mind is pathological. It's not because one is connected to the other, causing the other. And so a big part of meditation and yoga and hypnotherapy is finding the link that your mind and your body are associated. um, but yeah, I would say for anybody, that's going through this process, definitely moving your body in any way is going to be helpful. And then in a more energetic way to deal with emotions, yoga and Tai Chi, Qigong, um, Reiki, chronic healing, those types of things are going to help move the flow of energy.
So, what I find also interesting is that I'm 84. I just turned 84 about 2 weeks ago.
Happy
And,
birthday.
well, thank you. And I was born during the Second World War, and things were very tough, so that my mom and dad got married when they were 30 in 1938, before the war, and they were happy and were in love, and very quickly they had one boy, one girl, and then in about April of 1940, Hitler decided to invade the rest of Europe, although they already did Eastern Europe. They had invaded Poland, and then he decided to invade Europe. And then my dad and their new family was called into the Dutch army in April of 1940. And for 5 years, they wouldn't know if he had lived or died, because the last time they saw him was in the bombing of Rotterdam, that bombed the whole center of Rotterdam, and thousands of people died. So for 5 years, my mom was on her own, and then she had the two little kids, and then pregnant with me. I was born November 1st, 1940, and things were tough. And I still remember the bombers overhead. They were bombing the Allied forces. That's the first memory that I have. Hundreds of bombers overhead. I can still hear the sound of it even now, and there's no sound like it. Hundreds of them. And then we would go outside, in the distance we see the sky being red, as the cities were bombed just across the border from us in Eastern Europe, or in Eastern Holland, 10, 15 minutes from the German border. And then the next thing that I remember is the hunger winter of 1944-45. There was no food, and because the Germans had cut off the food to put pressure on the Dutch, and so a lot of kids died, a lot of older people died, and we as kids then, 4 years, 5 years old, 6 years old, every morning we would go into the railroad yards with gunny sacks, pick up anything edible and burnable. And then the winter of 1944-45 was the coldest winter on record in Holland. And we had this little room that we were in, a little part that we would heat because there was not enough fuel to heat the whole house. And I can still feel, even now, the cold and the heat at the same time. And then the hunger always stayed with me. And then the other part that stayed with me is we were liberated by the Canadian Army April the 12th, 1945, and it left such an impression on me that I always knew from that point forward I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And it took me until I was 23 until I did. But during the war years, when things were in particular difficult, we saw far too much that we should not have seen. Even during the occupation period, where people were dragged out of their houses and sent to work camps, or worse yet, concentration camps, never came back. And seeing during the invasion, too many people were shot all around us, saw too many people that had been shot or had been wounded. And so it left always for me the fear of losing that one parent that we had, because everybody around you had the same issues and the same problems. So you were on your own pretty well, my mom and three little kids. And so that always kind of stayed with me. And it took well into my 50s, probably, that at one point in a relationship that I had, actually, it was now my wife, but we had some counseling. And then during the counseling, the counselor said, I'd like to talk to John on his own and about the inner child that may have something to do with the past. And so we all agreed that that's what would happen. But I had no idea about what the inner child was all about. And so when I got the counseling, extremely emotional, so, but obviously helpful, but it was still there that stayed with you. And those are some of the things that you're referring to. The other part about me, as an example for your counseling profession, is that I was not very successful academically. I failed grade 3. I failed grade 7 3 times. And then at 13, they said, what are you going to do with this guy? Some people said, well, send him to the mentally challenged school. They said, no, we're not going to do that. So let's create a job for him so that he can work with his hands. So my dad had been in the lumber business. My grandfather was a master carpenter. So he sent me to a furniture factory at 13. And so I became, and then in the evening, I would go to the college to become a furniture maker. And so that's what I did. And so kids can be hard on each other. So even when I failed grade 7 for the third time, all the friends that I had that went on to college and university, I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then I was kind of looked down on. And so the cumulative things that happened to me, I didn't know what that would mean to me in terms of, what the subconscious mind had laid a foundation in a way for what would happen next. Because still in my mind was the fear of losing that parent, the remembering the war and the trauma related to it, hunger, fear of bombers, all of those things. And then the other part that I did not realize in my case, I must have been a real basket case actually, but anyway. So the so the it took me until I was 57 years old, already in Canada, that I picked up a book, and the book's title, I still have the book here actually. I picked it up in 1997, January 1997. The book was about driven to distraction. And I don't know why I picked it up, because I did, and I started looking at it. It was about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, that's me. I'm ADHD. So, this book, in fact, I wrote in it here in Dutch, January 1997. Now, in Dutch, I finally know who I am, because the reason that I wrote it in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it. I didn't. It was implied that it was a mental disorder of some sort. I know better now, obviously, but so that became a part of my life as well that I was not aware of until much, much later, and when I was virtually 57. So I made a major decision, as you did, that I always knew from the time that I was 5 I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada, and then the other part, obviously not successful academically, but I always knew, even in my mind, I was just as smart, not better than, as the other ones, but I was different. And I never quite knew who then, who am I? So and so then, obviously, being implied that I was dumb, stupid, and blah blah blah, couldn't figure the school, all those other negative things. Although it didn't totally drag me down, but I carried it with me in my, as you say, in my subconscious mind, obviously. And then I was going to go to Canada when I was 17, but my parents wouldn't let me. And then I got drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years. And then I finally made the decision to apply for an immigration or landed immigrant status in Canada at the Canadian Embassy in Holland. My parents here didn't even know that I went there, and then I was accepted. I wanted to leave within 3 weeks to go to Canada. The other part that I did, I wanted to start with nothing. A suitcase, 3 books, very little money, couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. I just wanted to do it alone. And so that's what I did in July of 1965. Left Amsterdam, flew to Montreal, took the train in Montreal across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights. That's a long, long, long way. Because I wanted to go to British Columbia. That's where all the trees are. And so I wanted to build, that was the other part of my dream. I wanted to build a lumber mill. And so I came to Vancouver, went to the immigration department, couldn't speak the English, but fortunately there was a German fellow there, and I could speak some German. So I told him what I wanted to do. He said, go to Prince George, right here. I can still see where the bus station used to be here 60 years later, the Greyhound station. And so came off the bus. I had my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and then I also counted my money. I had exactly $25.47. But what I had
Amazing.
lots of, attitude. No matter how tough, I've always been like that. No matter how tough things are, I know they will be better tomorrow. And I don't accept anybody that is negative. I avoid them. I had passion Whatever I do, I give it 125%. The other one is work ethic. I work harder than anybody, even still today at 84. I still get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed. I always think I'm late, and I enjoy every day, virtually every day, no matter how busy you are, all the challenges along with it. I still do that now. And after having worked in the workforce in some form or fashion for 71 years, I enjoy every day and everything that I do. So, but it took me until that going to counseling on relationship issues with my now wife 42 years later, but and we are in love and care about each other, obviously. But that the counselor saw something that was unique and was able to separate that from the issue, which was absolutely very significant because all the things that had happened had really never been dealt with. And even at the age of 57, 50 years old, and then, it changed my life. And then the other part that changed my life is that I had no idea about ADHD, uh, and by pure circumstance, I found that book, and I call it now a superpower. And so uh, I'm quite vocal about it these days. That I usually include it in presentations that I do, and I nearly wore it out. But the fellow that wrote the book is Dr. Halliwell, and he has written 18 books, very well known globally as for his expertise, especially in ADHD. And he is ADHD and has dyslexia. So do I. And so he wrote this book in 1993. I bought it in 1997, January 1997. So you are podcast number 354 for me, podcast number 203, On the Brink with John A. Brink. I had an interview, a podcast with Dr. Halliwell.
Mm.
Can you believe it? And
Mm.
so, as we had the podcast, it's podcast number 203. Anybody that is close to ADHD or has family members, I urge them to watch the podcast because Dr. Halliwell is amazing. And obviously, I lived it for a long time. So, it's very, very interesting discussion. In fact, as we talked about it, is that I thought that probably up to 8 to 10% of the population ADHD, male and female. I believe after I read the book and did all my searching on Google to understand it, I understood a couple of things. First, that the frequency of occurrence much higher than that, probably as close to 20% rather than 8 or 10%. In my interview with Dr. Halliwell, I suggested that to Dr. Halliwell. He said, no, John, it's more than 25%. I agree with him. Then the other part that was my experience, I've been interactive in business. Yes, I built my sawmill and my lumber operations and a number of other companies. But this podcast is not about the success of John, but I did a lot of stuff. I have 10 different companies. I'm a very active podcaster, top 1% globally. And then, writing books. I'm working on my fifth and sixth book. And one of them is ADHD Unlocked, very popular actually. And so all of that, and it is because of, not in spite of that, but because of that I do that, because I believe that a lot of people say to me, how do you do all the stuff that you do? I say, it's ADHD, that's how I do it. And so coming back to Dr. Halliwell, the other thing that was my experience was all the interaction with business people I'm on a number of boards. I'm very involved in other businesses and all over the place. Met a lot of successful individuals, business people. I suggested to Dr. Halliwell in that podcast 203 that in my belief that probably 50% of the successful, and the operative is successful, entrepreneurs are ADHD. He said, no, John, probably 75%. I agree with him, you know. So the reason for this story is that laying the foundation from the time that I was born in areas of trauma and seeing far too much, the fear of losing that only parent that we had, that we knew of, and then the circumstantial. I'm not a doc or I don't know ADHD. I was born, I believe, ADHD, regardless of the war and all the other things. But that, in addition, at least in my mind, and then the trauma of rejection or being suggested to be lesser than and not reconciling, but then at some point still having the foundation that I believe I was as good as everybody else, not better than, but as good as everybody else, and then starting with nothing. I'm not recommending to anybody to do that because it was a challenge, but I did, and then it became for me. It took me a long time to get to the point to say, "Who am I?" And so it took me a long time to do that. It probably involved the meeting with the counselor in the issue of the inner child. The next one likely was, some other things that I was doing, that lack of confidence, although I already was successful in the businesses that I did. I was not very good at communicating with others, and but I was good at doing business, but I still didn't reconcile as to who I was, and then becoming a good communicator by pure circumstance. I became involved in an organization called the Toastmasters,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there is probably 450,000 people around North America as we speak that are involved in Toastmasters. And there's probably 10 million people that have been involved in different levels. And Toastmasters primarily is about what some people think about being communication, giving communication skill, or becoming good presenters. First and foremost, is about becoming good listeners. And then speaking on your feet is the second one that is very important. And it gave me, again, more confidence. But at some point, at the latter part in life, I reconciled most of these issues because of those and in spite of all of those. And then started writing about 5, 6 years ago. And then became very, very active in the communication sides. I got to the level, I was 10 years in Toastmasters, became a DTM, a Distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest level. And it obviously took me time gradually to build that self confidence in saying, who am I? And then reconciling where, at what points in life I made the big step. But the one was stepping on that airplane with my suitcase with nothing and with the dream of building a lumber mill, and was the biggest step that I took.
Yeah, and it's very inspirational, and it's such a great example of the subconscious mind. It's not bad, right? It's protecting us. And so with your experience in the war, you heard those sounds and you knew next time you hear those sounds, it's danger, right? It means danger. So the same way you might have said, well, I'm hungry now. This is bad. I'm never going to feel this way again in the future, right? And so we make these declarations usually they can be good. Like yours, you took adversity and you became resilient and you were a hard worker. Though sometimes in relationships, it's, as a child, maybe you're yelled at by your mom and you're like, I'm never going to let anyone ever yell at me again. And then you go out into the world and anyone remotely trying to give you feedback or corrective criticism, you're like, why are you yelling at me? So that's just some examples of how the inner child, when the inner child is brought to the surface and we can look at what it is that they're still holding on to, what fears are they holding on to that they don't need anymore, right? When you came over to Canada, you didn't need that fear of those sounds. They stuck with you along with some other things, and then you worked through them. But I loved when you said the question, who am I? People ask me all the time, what do I have to do? What books do I have to read? What practices? Just start by saying, who am I? Who am I? And who was I when I was a child? Who am I now?
I
And so, I want to also go back to, you uh, having trouble with maybe some of your peers, which nowadays it's so common. I want to just tell everybody that there's nothing wrong with them, right? There's nothing wrong, especially not with a child, right? A child cannot be blamed. It is not their fault. But we hold on to that we're bad, that we did something wrong, that we shouldn't have reacted this way. Like for you had one parent, you're in a war-torn zone, but there was probably some responsibility that you took on while I should be doing something else. And so that's just what we need to be reminded, even as successful adults, that there's nothing wrong with us. We could take that, have compassion for ourselves, and then explore, well, who am I and who do I want to be, right? So it doesn't end there. Then you can take your subconscious mind and say, well, let's tap into the other part of it, which is, who do I want to be? What do I want in life? Right? We can have all the success and all the love and all the joy and the peace that we want, but we do have to go in and we do have to connect with the inner child and some of those older parts that don't see things, so bright and airy and free and fun. So thank you so much for giving that example and that journey, because that's exactly, what we're talking about, right? Is, as a child, you had some really tough situations. Though nowadays people are, even though they have everything, they're still being emotionally traumatized, right? So we can't, even though it's not as bad of a trauma, it's still a trauma. It's still preventing them from moving forward, from being successful, from having good relationships, from getting a job or moving up or creating a business. It's keeping them stuck. And all the conversation and all the negative thoughts is just going to keep them stuck. And so that's why it's important to reach out to to reach into your inner child. So yes, and thank you. As a man, it's really important for you to say that. So I appreciate that, because sometimes men will think, well, I don't need to do that. That's not my
I'm
thing.
tough, right? So,
Yeah, right. I'm tough. I'm a tough guy. I don't need
yeah,
to. But actually, it's really healthy and it's empowering.
exactly.
Definitely.
So the
Yeah.
other part that is important to me, Tara, is that I do a lot of presenting. Present to younger people in high schools, colleges, university. The other part is that I heard on a U.S. channel, I forget now which one, but that in the United States, probably 75% of the people that work do not like their job. And I believe it is the same in Canada. And of those 75% that don't like their job, probably 70% of them are looking for another job. And so a lot of times when I do presentations to younger people, universities, colleges, whatever they are, and I usually ask them, what do you want to do after you leave here? And a lot of them say, I don't know. I don't know. I said, but I recommend respectfully is that find out what direction suits you most. You know, if you like truck driving, talk to a truck driver, see what is involved. What do you do? How does that? How about this? How about that? Or if you want to be a contractor, build houses, talk to a contractor. A lot of them love to talk to people that say, I'm searching for a direction. And if you use it well, then you can maybe even spend some time with them, just being around them and seeing what is involved. Most of them, I would say, would be positive about that approach. You want to be a lawyer, talk to lawyers, without them charging you, but just ask them about how about your job and what is the pluses, the minuses, or an accountant or a financial individual or whatever. Find out what it is, because that you don't want to, the direction you choose when you're younger in terms of education or whatever you want to do becomes very, very important for the rest of your life. It will affect all the things you do, relationships in particular, but also happiness and contentment. And so I found that I had to write a book about that. So the book that
Yeah.
I wrote is Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream, and
Mhm.
saying, okay, John, so you started working when you were 13. So 71 years later, are you living the dream? I am every day. And and that part to me is important. And then the other part that I usually say now is so many people are not happy about who they are, the way they look, not exclusive to females, but also males, is that, or the way they dress, and this is not right, and that's not right, and it's saying, remember, remember, there is only one of you on this earth. Only
Mm.
one. There's no one like you, and you are special. Not more special than somebody else, but look at yourself as being special. That's who you are. Come to peace with who you are and find out, who am I? It would be then the next step. But first and foremost, accept who
Mhm.
you are, and then be unique as that individual. Give back to the community, get involved with people, and then be, being confident in terms of who you are. That's another part that I believe is very important. Once you accept the fact that you are unique as an individual, then the other things will follow. And if it need help. That's why you have people that are specializing in that field to identify challenges, as I had with the inner child, as you find every day in your profession, and feeling on your part, I'm sure, the reward of unlocking, if you wish, those challenges is the challenge, and then seeing the reward is very, very important for a lot of people around the world, because globally, we all are virtually the same, are all delicate, have all challenges. And so this is not unique to the United States or to North America, but it applies globally.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a notion that as we age, our inner child just grows up. And I think you can agree that time doesn't heal all wounds, and our subconscious mind can take us right back to that. And so when it comes to passion or joy or something, we have to find something we like doing. That's fine if you want to, go a traditional route of being an accountant and a lawyer, but are you gonna incorporate your hobbies into your life then? Are you gonna, maybe you like cooking or you like guitar, you like gardening. Are you gonna make sure that you're fulfilled in some way and accessing the joy that you have that inner child brings out? So that's the thing, the inner child synonymous with creativity or joy or love. We have to make sure that we feed that in order to stay balanced, or else it gets dusty and old, and it tries to hide, but it doesn't help us reach our full potential to live a life that I believe we should be living. And that's one of I think people should be happy. I think we're designed with the potential to all be happy and have love and joy and connection and peace.
Now, the other
Definitely.
part, that Tara, is that stress seems to be a common theme in many people's lives as well. How does chronic stress impact our nervous system, in our subconscious mind.
Yeah.
And how do we deal with
So
that?
similar to the time doesn't heal all wounds, time doesn't process our old stressors. So if a stressor is stored in the body, in the nervous system, it is going to just pile up and pile up and pile up. And it's going to manifest as an illness or as other symptoms, um, excess weight, not being able to, insomnia, not being able to sleep. So it's like as if we don't take out the trash. If we're not processing these things, our stressors in day to day, we aren't leaving any room and they just get stored up and they pile up, and that's when things become unhealthy ultimately. So I mean the most basic way, and would be to start would be exercise does help the nervous system release that tension, but and just notice the body. Like, are you working, are your shoulders shrugged, are you bracing all the time, or do you get activated if you hear a loud noise or jumpy, or all of that is signs that your nervous system is not happy and it's not rested and you're living in fight or flight. And one of the worst parts of that too is we don't realize we're impacting other people then. So when we go to the coffee shop and we get mad because there's not two sugars in, we only wanted one, then we're ruining the barista's day or the person behind us, and that negative energy is just being transferred. And so while it is, like little things like that, if you think of it, if you go macro to micro, like we're all impacting one another. So think of it as, if you don't want to help yourself, think about helping the people around you, right? So, oh, well, don't worry about me. I'm old. My health is no good. Like, doesn't matter. Well, think that when you help yourself, you are helping other people because you're healthier. Your energy is better. You're spreading more joy, more love, more peace, more universal life force energy. And so we have to start thinking about it in another way, because the way that it is now is like, oh, I can handle it. I can take it. I'm tough. That's not working for us.
No. So the other part about yeah, the other part about it is that health is so critically important, right? So, and I can say that as at 84, that I'm very conscientious, thanks to my wife more than anything. Likely, she is a vegetarian, and I didn't listen as well as I could have for many, many years. Although I was not totally abusive, but I had a case of diverticulitis that breached my colon, and that nearly killed me. So I came about that close, and that kind of triggered me in terms of fitness and diet. And so I'm very conscientious of diet now, uh, and then in terms of fitness, starting fairly late in life, and I was 69 already, and I was one of those individuals that at the end of the year, we always made the commitment. We're going to do this, that at the end of the year. And then I'm going to buy a membership to the gym. And then 2 weeks later, can find 100 reasons why I'm too busy to go to the gym. Well, I didn't. I stayed then after I recovered from the near death experience. And, uh, and after the other part for me was I need a commitment, so I started as a trainer, and I'm not saying that everybody should, it's more expensive, but at least use one to start maybe so you know what to do and how to do it. And so, the after working with a trainer for 6 years, and somebody said to me and to us, "Hey, John, have you ever thought about competing?" Competing me, and I said, well, why not? So I started in training, and then I competed in 2017, 2018 here in northern BC, bodybuilding and physique. Came in second and third bodybuilding and third in physique. That qualified me for the provincials. Did the same, and then that qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And then COVID came, and now at 84, I will be competing again in the Arnolds in 2025. And this is I wrote a book about that, living young, dying old. That's me, actually. And right after this podcast, I'm going to the gym, and that's what I do on a regular basis. And and so diet very, very important. So I do all the shopping now. If I go to a grocery store, I go to the outside of the grocery store where all the vegetables are, all the healthy food, and I stay away from the center aisles where all the processed food is and the super processed. I have no idea what is in it, so we stay away from that. So I basically go organic, be careful with my diet, go to the gym. And the amazing thing, I'm not suggesting to the people that are watching us, but simply the message that I leave with them respectfully is that you're never too old to change. I hear too often they say, "Well, I'm already 45; it's too late." No, it isn't. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, and I'm 84 years old. And so I started when I was 69. And then once you make the commitment, I like the food. I love it. Even if you eat conscientiously with the health and fitness in mind, it can be very tasteful and you will like it. And then in terms of exercise, you don't have to be an Olympian or a bodybuilder, but that once you started, start walking half an hour a day, maybe 3 days a week. Find a partner or a friend or whoever to walk with you, motivates you. And then, before you know what will happen, Tara or John is saying, "Hey, John, Tara, what did you do? You're looking great." And so it becomes rewarding. And then after some time, and I've been working out now for 15 years, I love it. Going to the gym. I love going to the gym. And what is even more rewarding from a diet perspective, I like what I do from a diet perspective, and I like what I do physically. I'm in good shape, good health, and all thanks to doing that and becoming more conscientious of fitness and health.
Yeah.
And the most important parts for me, which I follow, a lot of times there's so much information on it that you don't know which way to go. Is I say usually try to get sunshine or daylight is important. Then and vitamin D, and then secondly, get enough sleep, preferably 8 to 9 hours a day. Then eat healthy and be conscientious of what is in the food, and then get exercise. And the combination of all of those, and stay away from the obvious. I'm not even going to mention them because we know them all. Too much drinking, too much smoking, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even going to mention it, but if you stay with those, then you're going in the right direction. And that's important. And then the other part, your mind, and then the subconsciousness of the mind, even if you have to get some assistance and some help, extremely rewarding. And for all those tough guys out there that say, "I don't need counseling, I know it all," you don't. And it can be really rewarding. And even guys like me, if globally, if I can help people to go in that direction, then I know I've been successful.
Absolutely. And I work with a lot of clients that are 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and they say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did this. I feel better than I did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago." And I'll work with clients on weight loss or fitness with hypnosis to help them get started. And that's when I bring them into the holistic coaching because I agree, it's what you eat. You are what you eat, and you want to make sure you're getting sunshine and you're getting exercise and you have healthy relationships. So absolutely, it's exact well said. And like I said, it is not. It is very common for older people to say, "Oh, it's too late." And I have evidence from numerous clients that I've been working with for years that are so happy in their golden years because they made the choice. It's not too late. I'm still here and I can enjoy my life and I can spread that joy to other people. So I agree completely.
Tara, it has been an amazing podcast. And again, seeing you, for all those people watching us from around the globe, subscribe to our podcast, both Tara's and mine. Have you got a website, Tara, that we should?
My name would be great. That's a great place to go. I have free consultations to see if it's a good fit or just to explore what you might benefit, how you might benefit. TeraOneil.com, Taraoneil. And I love to hear from people. Even if we don't work together, we always have a great exchange.
I like that. And for all those people watching us, subscribe to our website, like them, and share them. And Tara, it was a pleasure. It was a privilege to see you again. Let's make sure we stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John. You're very inspirational for me and
Thank-
my clients.
Thanks, Tara. Take care. Bye bye.